So Apple just released the Final Cut camera app for iOS. This is a free app, which means iPhone users have a native Pro mode for the first time. You know, just like most Android users have had for years. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use all the features, including how to set manual focus, shutter speed, ISO, and white balance. And those are the 4 key settings for any camera app. And you know, if you want to learn how to master any camera app, think about taking my full course on Patreon. As always, the link is in the description. The main unique feature of the app is being able to run live multicam sessions by connecting up to 4 devices running Final Cut camera. And this allows you to preview, record, and sync different angles in Final Cut Pro for iPad. But aside from that, there are a number of basic manual controls. So this doesn't have the range of features that apps like Blackmagic, Filmic Pro, Beastcam, and many others have, but there are some nice touches as well as some poor ones. The focus control on the Blackmagic app is pretty poor in my opinion because they deliberately made it harder to make smooth focus changes. But in this app, it works fine. But it also has its limitations. But one thing I do like is the nicely designed zoom control. But let's go through everything and you can see whether it's for you or whether it's not for you. Now bear in mind that if you want to use this app, you will need to be running iOS 17.4 or later. One great advantage of having a native Pro mode, so to speak, is that if you're already familiar with the regular camera app in your iPhone, then you don't need to learn a new interface. The Final Cut camera app is laid out in a similar way, but with some differences. Well, the main difference is that this is a video shooting app only. So all the photo shooting features have been removed. And in fact, all the other modes have been removed as well. So there's no time lapse, there's no slow-mo, there's no cinematic mode. In fact, the Final Cut camera app is more minimalist than the regular camera app. There's a lot less going on, and it's entirely focused on recording regular video. So in a way, that's actually really good for iPhone video creators, if you just want something simple. So let's go through all the settings. On the left in the middle, we have the main video settings: frame rate, resolution, color space, and codec. If we tap this little island of settings, we can change them. So the island opens up, and then we can tap the setting that we want to change. So I'm going to change HDR to SDR. For codec, you can switch between HEVC and ProRes. So there's actually no H.264 codec in this app. And when you've finished changing settings, you just tap the X at the bottom to close it. Tap the cog top left to get more settings. We've got 3 headings: Preferences, Tools, and Audio. Under Preferences, we have the same settings that we just saw. We got codec, we got format, which is resolution and frame rate. We got color and dynamic range, and that's just basically SDR or HDR. Below that, we can switch stabilization on or off, and by default, this is actually off. We can also choose to mirror the front camera, and this doesn't change how you monitor the video when you're filming. It just changes how the video comes out. So I prefer mirrored because otherwise everything is the wrong way round. And if you have any text in the image, it's going to be backwards. And below we have some support links for things like help and feedback. Under tools, we have a couple of composition guides. We've got grid overlay and aspect ratio. So grid overlay is basically the same as the rule of thirds grid that you get in the main camera app. Aspect ratio guide allows you to add a square or a 4:3 guide. So it's quite limited in options that you have there. There's no like widescreen or anything. We then have exposure and focus guides. The overexposure indicator gives you these red chevrons in any areas that are overexposed. Focus peaking is supposed to add a sort of green outline to anything that is in focus, but I actually found that this is pretty poorly implemented. It seems, I found that there's just green everywhere, even around objects that are not in focus. So I can just show you, like if I make the foreground in focus here, you can see that the out of focus background, there's still some green in there. So I don't know, that's not too helpful, I don't think. But maybe they can fix that in later updates. Under audio, we just have one setting. So this is basically if you have an external mic connected, then you can switch here between the external and the internal mics. In the bottom left corner, we have a button which launches the live multicam feature. So this only works for Final Cut Pro for iPad. And as I don't currently own an iPad, I can't actually show you this feature. But I can give you an idea of how this works. You can now connect your Final Cut camera devices using the local network. In other words, Wi-Fi. And then everything is going to be synced up so that when you bring it all into Final Cut Pro for iPad, everything will be in the right place and you just need to switch between the cameras. Kind of like a live TV setup. To the right of the multicam button, we have the amount of video storage that you've got left measured in hours and minutes. And this depends on the video settings. At the moment it says 11 hours, but if I switch to ProRes, which uses up a lot more memory, it drops down to only 17 minutes, so that's a big difference. And then we have battery life as a percentage. And top left, we have the audio level meter. On the right, in the middle, we have a simple lens picker. The good thing about this app is that the cameras are locked and they won't automatically switch as they do in the native app. So I know that you can stop the native app switching cameras, but this is just simpler and it's clearer. It's, what you see is what you get, and quite often I prefer that instead of having to mess about in settings. So I've got an iPhone 15 Pro here, and in the native app you get a 2x crop in without losing any resolution. But here you do not get that 2x crop in. You just get the 3 cameras to choose from. Tap the magnifying glass to open up the zoom control. And this is one feature which I do think is well implemented. It's not just your regular stop-start zoom. You can slow or accelerate the zoom by placing your finger in different places on this slider. So if you place your finger just a small difference from the center, you get a slow zoom. And if you place it further away, the zoom speeds up. So of course you can move your finger as you're zooming, and you can sort of ease in and out of your zoom. So I'm not someone who uses digital zoom all that much, because you lose quality, but I do hope that this gets copied by other camera app creators because I think it's intuitive and it's really easy to use. So just tap the number at the bottom and you can also switch cameras here. So on my iPhone 15 Pro, if you select the main camera, then it will only zoom within the range of the main camera, and if you select the telephoto, it will only zoom within the range of the telephoto. If you tap the little arrow above the record button, you can open up some more controls. At the top, we can choose to lock the camera to a certain orientation. There's 2 landscape options. There's one when you have the cameras on the left, or you can choose to have the cameras on the right. In other words, tip the phone upside down, and then there's a portrait option for vertical recording. Tap the AF button to open focus controls. So if you've switched to manual focus, it's going to say MF here and not AF. And now you can use the slider to change focus. So while this app doesn't have the kind of sticky slider that ruins the Blackmagic app focus control, it does have the other problem that the Blackmagic app has, which is that you can't go from the minimum focus to the maximum focus in one swipe of the finger. If you wanted to record a focus pull and the objects are kind of far apart and you've got a long focus distance between them, then you might find that you're going to run out of slider space. So you can't do it all in one movement, which is, what you need if you're going to record a focus pull. But as a basic focus slider, it's fine. That's about as far as it goes. Now, once you use the slider, it switches to manual mode. And if you want to switch back to autofocus, you just need to tap the bottom where it says manual. Tap the plus/minus button to open the exposure slider. At first glance, you might think this is just an exposure compensation slider and nothing more. But actually, you can set shutter speed and ISO here too. So if you just simply use the slider, you can increase or decrease the exposure, but the camera is still going to set exposure automatically. but it's just going to adjust it up or down depending on what you set here, whether it's a plus or a minus number. So basically it's exactly the same as the native app. But if you want to get the ISO and the shutter speed settings, you tap the bottom where it says Auto. And this now brings up the manual ISO and shutter speed settings. So you can tap and then use the slider to adjust each one manually. And in low light conditions, I tend to always bring ISO down as low as possible. And if you don't set it like this manually, then your iPhone is nearly always going to push up the ISO and it's going to create tons of quality degrading noise. Now, if you want to switch back to auto exposure, just tap where it says manual. The final button at the bottom is the white balance setting. Tap to open up a slider. And once you use the slider, the white balance will switch to fixed mode and it will not automatically adjust. At the bottom of the slider, you can see it now says fixed. So you can simply adjust the white balance here and then leave it until you need to set it again. But if you tap where it says fixed, you're going to open up some presets. At the top, we can switch back to automatic. And if we tap the fixed button, we just go back to where we were, back to the slider. And below, we have various white balance presets for different conditions. And below each, you're going to see the Kelvin number of that setting. The next two settings are basically the same as the native camera app. Above the record button is the front to rear camera switch. And below the record button is the gallery. And this is pretty similar to the Photos app. But all you're going to see here is the media recorded with this app. You're not going to see anything else. You're not going to see any photos. You're not going to see any videos you recorded with the native app. You can swipe left and right to view the different files. The button, bottom left, opens a media transfer window. And I believe this is for when you are using the Multicam setup with Final Cut for iPad. And here you're going to find all your connected devices, including the iPad, and then you can choose where to send the media. Tap all media to switch to a thumbnail mode. If you tap the three dots button, top right, you can change to show the thumbnails in a 16:9 aspect ratio instead of a square one. So that's basically everything that's contained within this app. It's pretty basic, but sometimes basic is good, isn't it? Because, you might download a new app and you've got a new interface to learn and you've got complicated settings and it can all be a bit overwhelming. And if all you want to do is be able to set your shutter speed in your ISO and maybe adjust focus, then you don't really need to learn a whole new app to be able to do so. You've got this one, which is very similar to the iPhone native camera app. But if you do want to learn how to master any camera app, including Blackmagic, Filmic Pro, Beastcam, or any of the others, like I say, think about taking my full course on Patreon. As always, you'll find links in the description. Other than that, see you in the next video.